Hey, well, welcome back to the 100 Movements podcast. Today, we are continuing on in this series that we've been in of just exploring the elements of MDNA. And today we are talking about discipleship and disciple making, which we would say is the beating heart of every movement. Our guest today is somebody who's had a huge influence on my life, personally, super grateful for that, but who has embodied and worked in this realm of discipleship and disciple making for years. So Jeff Vanderstelt, who's helped pioneer the Soma family of churches, is the executive director of Saturate. We'll hear more about both of those today. And the author of books like Saturate and Gospel Fluency, which I would say, again, huge influence on my life. Our network here in Kansas City would encourage you to just go pick up those and spend long hours just digesting those. So currently in a season of training leaders and everyday people to see all of life as discipleship to Jesus. So Jeff, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, man.
Yeah. Let's start just hearing a little bit of your story for those that may not know you, just who you are, what you're leading in right now, a little bit about Soma and Saturate.
Yeah, like you said, I'm the executive director of Saturate, and we'll talk more about what that is and what we do with that, as well as one of the people got to see this beautiful family of churches all around the globe started called Soma. And part of that journey is I was in youth ministry for quite some time and consistently saw students become disciple makers, and then was at one of the largest churches in the country and kept hearing from parents, how is it that my kids are able to do stuff that I have no idea how to do? And then I would watch these high school students oftentimes graduate and be encouraged to take a seat, invite a friend, give their money. And that was going to be their biggest contribution. And it's like, man, like they went from being on the field playing the game to being kind of in the stands. And so I got to a place where I just thought, we've got to make it normative where every single Christian, it doesn't matter their age, is a part of this game and is actually in the game making disciples. So moved back to Seattle to start a church called Soma. Again, the beating drum was, let's make it really, really hard to be a part of this church and not be a disciple maker. Like let's make it so normative that if you're a part of Soma, being a disciple maker is just a part of your life. And, we didn't do that perfectly. We made lots of mistakes, learned along the way. But I will say it was an incredible journey just trying to figure that out and solve that problem. And we saw God just do so many wonderful things that led to people coming to learn from us from all over the world. I think there were over 30 countries that sent several thousand leaders over the years to get trained through our Soma school, which led to us having churches getting started over the world that carry the same DNA. And eventually a lot of those people said, hey, can we just be a family of churches? So that's what started Soma, and it's an interdenominational family of churches. It's not a denomination, but it's made up of many denominations, which is really a big part of my heartbeat, is to see the church unified. And it's also what led to Saturate, because as we were serving other churches, we realized we couldn't just keep having local churches do all that. It's at some point you need to stay focused on reaching your city. And so we started Saturate as a way just to serve the larger church globally and equip everyday people to be on mission in everyday life. And eventually that led to us clarifying, hey, if we're going to spend even more time in one city, let's go after 5 key initiatives. Let's get people to unite around prayer movement, disciple-making movements, leader health, serving their city in ways that look like the kingdom of God breaking in, and then building into all of that a multiplication of new kingdom expressions so that eventually they fill the city with the presence of Jesus. So that's what Saturate does, is we help cities work through those 5 key elements. And consistently we discover the 2 weakest areas of those 5 are disciple making and leader health. And so that's probably where we spend the majority of our time now, is on those 2 things, because there's a lot of other great organizations doing the other 3. And doing the other 2 that I just mentioned, but it's where we find our sweet spot for sure, is helping develop disciple making people, disciple making systems and strategies, and then making sure we're building in leader health into the whole process. So it's a lot
Yeah.
of what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all that. I know as we talk today, I imagine there will be some integration in the leader health and the disciple making.
Yeah.
It's unhealthy people reproduce unhealth, and healthy people disciple people into health. So, since we're in this series on MDNA, these 6 elements that lead toward movement, we're zeroing in just on the disciple making. Uh, I just want to hear, what is it? I think we have a general understanding of like, oh, I know what disciple making is. But I'd love to hear your take on that. What has shaped how Saturate sees this and the work that you do in helping others do this same kind of work?
Yeah, that's good. For me, the best way to capture what I think disciple making is it's like spiritual parenting.
Mm,
And Paul uses that kind of imagery. You go from the more, Jewish influenced rabbi student understanding. And there's a lot of people who've talked about that. I think sometimes it's confusing for people who don't live in that kind of culture. And
yeah.
so you see the Apostle Paul shift to an oikos, or a household familial understanding of formation. And I think that works much more effectively in a Western context where people aren't going to follow a rabbi for 3 years. They're going to have to do their normal life, right? They have a job, they've got a family, they've got, their neighborhood, they've got all these things that they're engaged in, sports and stuff. And so it's like, how do we think of it from, I think, a framework that makes sense? So I like using the language of oikos, or family, or household, and then thinking through spiritual uh, parenting. Because if you were, for instance, Janie and it took us 10 years to have our first baby. Well, we we didn't just sit around and do nothing about it. Like, we had to try and figure out what's wrong. Like, why are we not getting pregnant? Why is this not happening? And so I think the same thing is true. Is like, why are we not seeing new disciples made? Like, if
Mhm.
that's not happening in our church or our context, let's figure out what's going on. What's broken? What's missing? Do we not have the gospel? Do we not know how to share the gospel? Do we not know how to build relationships that are hospitable? Like, all those things. And I think it makes a lot of sense especially to the Western mind, to go, hey, we want to have spiritual babies. What does it take to do that? So we're going to see them grow, then become spiritual infants in the faith. How do you establish a brand new, child in the faith? How do you help them grow up to be a spiritual young adult? Or we use the language, that's the apprentice stage. That's what you're doing with a teenager. You're preparing them to go and lead something, or to leave the home, as it were. And so then they get ready to be a spiritual parent. So when we think about discipleship, we're thinking about that pathway from spiritually unborn to spiritual infant to spiritual child to spiritual young adult to spiritual parent, and ideally eventually spiritual grandparents, that you get to see multiple generations of work come from your influence. So we frame it up that way. And so then it shapes, like, okay, if it's spiritual parenting, what do you do to help someone move through that process? And that, to me, is what discipleship is. It's that process that we're leading them through to grow up into Christ likeness, to grow up into maturity, to grow up to one day hopefully be a spiritual parent themselves.
Yeah. I'm feeling sort of the weight on it as I have a teenager right now. In my head, as you're talking, I'm like, oh, I hope I'm doing this right.
Well, we just sent our last one off to college, so Janie and I are home alone. All three kids are gone. Our oldest is already in her career. Our next one is almost going to graduate this next year from college. So, like, man, it's that launch. And I think sadly, a lot of organizations and churches, it's like, I don't know if they forgot that that's the goal, or if they don't know
Mm,
how to do it, but the goal is not to have people perpetually dependent upon you.
yeah.
You would call me a bad father if my kids were still sitting in the house 30, 40 years old going like, I'm so glad you do everything for us, dad and mom.
Mm,
It's like, that's not okay. And yet somehow we built into this church a perpetual dependency, maybe codependency. Instead of going, no, at some point Christians should be able to say, hey, this was great. Thanks so much for pouring into me. I'm ready to go do it without you. And we do the same thing with college. Like, if someone was in college in the same degree program for 30 or 40 years, we'd say the professors failed.
Yeah.
right? And yet, for some reason, we built this kind of, I don't know, this perpetual dependency into the church in which people never graduate. They never
Mhm.
mature. And I'm not saying everybody has to leave a local congregation, but sadly, a lot of our churches are full of spiritual babies who haven't been brought up in the faith. And so I think, sometimes people create this caveat of evangelism and discipleship. I don't like that
Yeah.
divide because to me, evangelism is speaking the truths of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think you speak the good news of Jesus in every stage because we want to
Mhm.
grow them up into Christ in every stage. So I think we do evangelism with not yet believer, but we also keep doing evangelism all the way up into maturity because we keep sharing the good news of Jesus into every part of our life. And so for me, it's like this concept of discipleship for a lot of people, it's like that's what you do with people who are serious, and you do evangelism with those who are not yet believers. I'm like, no. When I think of disciple making, it's doing evangelism to non-Christians, doing evangelism to baby Christians, to growing baby Christians, young adult Christians, spiritual parents. Like we just never stop proclaiming Jesus in
Yeah.
all of life. And so I would also include that in my definition of a disciple. It's forming them into the person of Christ, becoming like Jesus through Jesus, right?
Mm.
Proclaiming Jesus, leading them to Jesus, creating a dependency and attachment with Jesus, helping them live life with Jesus in them and Jesus through them. Like it's got to be all Jesus centric. Otherwise, what happens is we create disciples of our organization or disciples of our system or our program or our brand or our personality. But we're calling them to be disciples of Jesus.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. I'm curious as how do I word this? It sounds like your own life has influenced your definition in the sense of like, I watch teenagers do this, also had a family, so that's informing it. You're also sort of answering a question of like, why is it broken in the Western church? Because we've made some separations.
Mm.
So, and you can answer this by talking about the work you do as Saturate. I'm just curious, like, what do you see as like, why is it broken? Why are we in the state that we are in the West? That we're missing that multiplication of people understanding this. Is it because they don't have that sense of discipleship is all of life from the beginning, and it's we need to understand evangelism in a different way? And you may have other things besides what you said, but
Well, I mean, it is a complex problem, but I think there's some simple parts of it. I think, Jesus said when a student's fully taught, they'll resemble their teacher. So if you look at the people that have been taught by you for some time, they tend to look like you or tend to look like the way in which you formed them. And usually those of us who have been trained in some form or another, we're trained in a particular way as well. And so like most of us were trained in a classroom with a professor, and we're all in rows facing forward listening to someone talk. And sometimes we dialogue, but sometimes we just write papers. And but it's highly not usually it's not very relational. It usually isn't all of life. It's around a concept or an idea, and we have cognitive resolution with that idea. And so much of our formation of those who are leading ministries has been a more didactic, learn some information, regurgitate the information, sit and listen to someone talk. So I just think we've reproduced what formed us in most cases. I mean, if you talk to most pastors, say, who discipled you? Most of them can't point to somebody. And if you ask them how, most of it still doesn't look like the way of Jesus or even the way of Paul, doing life together, making disciples in community together, being on mission together, like all of life stuff. And so I think we're just reproducing what we've created, and which
mm,
we shouldn't be surprised that we keep reproducing inept disciples in most cases, people who don't feel confident sharing their faith, opening their home, living life on mission and everyday stuff. So I think that's a big part of it. And then I think that that shapes then what we measure. So like our metrics form this too. So if you ask most leaders, what are they generally measuring? They're measuring attendance, they're measuring budget, finances. So their measurements create a culture. And then the other thing is then measurements show up in your language and in your narrative. So like what are the stories you tell? What are the things you celebrate? Like if I don't even have to ask, everyone knows. If we just said if you listen to most tweets out there, tweet feeds, Instagram feeds, whatever, what are most pastors, most ministry leaders celebrating? And you just know it's generally not, hey, I want you to know like we've got this many people in significant relationships with people who don't know Jesus, opening their home, opening their table, having conversations this week. Isn't that amazing? Like you don't hear that. You hear baptisms, you hear our churches growing, you hear we're opening a new campus. I mean, it's the things that you celebrate, the language that you use, the narratives you tell, the metrics you measure. That's what shapes the culture. And so then it's no surprise to me that discipleship's not really a part of that.
Mm,
Or minimally, it's conversion. Like we baptize these people, which is great. We should celebrate
yeah.
baptisms, but when that becomes kind of the ultimate, it's like think about how many parents are like, "Man, we had another baby. I don't know where the other kids are, but we had another one." You know? It's like, I know they didn't grow up, and I know they're not here anymore, and I'm not sure if they even live anymore, but praise God, we're having another one. And you're like, I think you should stop having babies for a while because all
Mm,
your kids are malnutritioned and underdeveloped and maybe even abandoned out there struggling in the world by themselves. Like maybe we
wow.
should go find those kids and care for them and that
Wow.
like stop having more babies when we can't even care for the ones we've got. Right. And so I just think there's a real problem in that again, celebrate baptisms. When Janie and I had our first child, we were so elated. But if I told you I didn't know where she was at year 4, you'd go, "I don't know, man. Like, there's something wrong with your parenting."
Yeah. Wow. That's a compelling. I've never run the metaphor that far. That is compelling. I shouldn't laugh over the discomfort. That's convicting as well.
Well, yeah, and Jesus has harsh words. I mean, the prophets had hard words to say to the shepherds who didn't care for the sheep.
Hmm.
And he talked about we leave the 99 to go find the one lost one.
Yeah.
Like, ho when I meet with elders now or leaders of churches, I just say, "Remember, you will give an account for the care of the flock that God's entrusted to you." Do you know where
Yeah.
they're at? Do you know how they're doing? Do you know what's going on with them? And again, I will beat the drum like crazy for evangelism for not yet believers. Like we need
Yeah.
to keep reaching the lost. But there's also when he's telling that story, he's talking about a sheep,
Hmm.
and it's like, okay, this is somebody that you have responsibility for. Do you
Yeah.
know where they're at? Have you gone to
Yeah.
find them? Do you care about them? Of course, he's confronting the religious leaders because they're fundamentally not very good shepherds. And
Yeah.
sadly, I think if we're not careful, we aren't healthy parents. And I think that word shepherd could translate someone who cares for someone like they're your own child. Like
Yeah.
you look after their care and what they need. So
Yeah. Thanks for that. Um, can we like understand saturate a little bit more? So just for those that are listening that feel the same sense of conviction that I probably currently feel, um, I know you have this process where you're helping churches think about we haven't done that. Like we've got
right.
a bunch of 4-year-olds. Like what's the journey for them just so people can go, we need more of that.
Yeah, when we originally started Saturate, I don't think I had the clarity I've got now around the problem. And so when we first started it, we just said let's just start creating more tools and more training and do one-day events where we could expose people to disciple making in everyday life. And that's been our drumbeat since the beginning is normal people making disciples in normal everyday life and making sure that they're gospel fluent, that it's all about Jesus. And so that's kind of, if you go to saturatetheworld.com, you can still find tons of tools and resources there that could serve you. But as we started discerning the problem, because like I said, we're trying to help a citywide thing. I tell people when I meet with pastors all the time, your job was not to have a great church. Your job was to see the city filled with the presence of Christ. So if you're
Hmm.
satisfied building a building, just know like that's not he's not satisfied with that.
Yeah.
Ephesians 1 says he wants to fill all in all. So like we've got to think through how are we filling the city or the region we live in with the presence of Jesus. And so that becomes our drumbeat all the time. It's like, how do we help the everyday believer see that what they do matters in everyday life? Well, as we kind of dialed it back, the real problem is most leaders don't know how to lead their people in that way. And like we've already said, most Christians are at probably an infant or maybe childish faith where they haven't really been built up or grown up in the faith. So what we finally did is we created the disciple making lab, which is a 10-month process. We're coming up with another form to make it available for people who can't do it in person like we prefer. Um,
Yeah.
but we basically help church leaders with their teams look at their present system, present structure, present culture, and do I think an honest evaluation. Like, what are we actually doing? What's actually being produced? Is our culture the kind of culture that is creating a disciple making movement or not? What would have to change? So we do a lot of assessment, to be honest, because I always tell people, you know, when you take, your GPS on your, whether you use Google Maps or Apple, whatever it is, it's like, in order to figure out how to get someplace, you have to figure out where you're at. You have to
Yeah.
define your location. So we want to define their location. Where are you presently at? What's your aim? What you think is a definition of a disciple? And then we help them build a pathway that
Mm.
addresses every stage that I already mentioned, from spiritually unborn to infant, child, young adult, parent, grandparent. So we help them build that entire process so they don't have any gaps anymore. Because that's the other thing I've noticed is a lot of our ministries have significant gaps, and people wonder, why aren't we raising up more leaders? That's usually because they've only built their system to go up to spiritual child. They haven't
Mm.
done the spiritual young adult apprenticeship stage. So it's no wonder they don't raise up leaders. It's just like you don't have any way to do it. That's why. So let's
Yeah.
help you build that so that you can raise up more and more spiritual parents. So you don't just have a big orphanage. Because again, that's what
Yeah.
most churches are. It's lots of babies, very few spiritual parents. We want to change that. So we help over a 10-month period, help a church design a much more holistic process for disciple making, and a little different than like you guys at the underground do such incredible work with building a pathway. You get the privilege of getting generally to work with people that really are dialed in specifically on some particular methods or expressions of church. We're kind of working with this very big swath of Christianity, and so I have to figure out how to make something work in somebody's theological structure, plan, their own denominational convictions, like all those things. Some are big churches, some are small.
Hmm.
So our goal is to figure out how to make your thing work. But granted, just like you experienced, Brian, when you guys are taking people through the pathway, there's a lot of stuff that has to be undone or
Yeah.
rethought or reformed or repurposed in that journey. So we help them do all of that.
Yeah. That's good, man. I imagine that's difficult. The
It's hard
paradigm
work.
shifting.
It's
Yeah.
hard work. And it's why we say it really takes more than 10 months, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's just us getting you going in the right direction. And then we commit to each church that we help that we will be available for them as long as they need us.
Yeah.
And so that sometimes it's ongoing coaching, sometimes it's, you know, visiting their location. There's a variety of ways in which we try to help these churches become more effective.
Yeah. Because that's disciple making. It's
That's
not
it.
done
Well,
in 10 months.
yeah, and that's the other thing too. The way that we do it embodies
Hmm.
the outcomes we want you to go after. So even our process
Yeah.
is demonstrating hopefully what they'll put in place. So
Yeah. The
their
medium is
experience,
the message on
that's
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if all you do then is have them sit and listen to you talk, and then say, "Go figure out your plan," it's no wonder they're just going to repeat the problem. So it's like, no, that's not
Yeah.
how we make disciples. That's part of it.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
information. There's a whole lot of other stuff: practice, reflection, evaluation, someone speaking into your life, telling you what they see. Like all that is included in our process.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a turn because I
Hmm.
feel, man, as much as I have experienced a journey with you, I would say, uh, if we don't talk about emotional health in this, then I haven't done my job or my calling from here
Yeah,
forward.
yeah,
So I'd just love to hear a little exposure for people to talk about the jour- the journey in your own life, your conviction around this, like as you think about disciple making and the importance of leader health, emotional health, and what you're integrating in that, training people in, and why it's so critical.
yeah. That's good. Well, let me say this. You asked earlier about what do I think is some of the problems why we're not seeing disciple making, and I think this is one of the problems. I think leader health, if my ego is too tightly attached to numbers and people staying around me and needing me for a long time, which I'd say is emotional unhealth. There's maybe even a form of narcissism in that, that I need to be the center of everything. Um, then I'm not going to want to create a multiplication movement where people don't need me. Right. That's so my own emotional unhealth is going to probably want people to stay near me and continue to be codependent in this relationship. The other thing that happens that I think that we reproduce who we are. So if we're not healthy, our systems won't be healthy, our culture won't be healthy, and the kind of disciples we make won't be healthy. And I had to face that. Like in my own journey, as much as I think we did some really, really good stuff, we also did some bad stuff. And I had to face that about 6 years ago with the loss of a dear friend of mine to suicide, and he was my Timothy in the faith and the guy that I poured my life into. So I had to like wrestle with what have we done and how did we get here? And of
Mm,
course I had to wrestle with some what we call toxic shame, where I took way too much responsibility for what he did, and I started to go into some really dark spaces. And so thankfully I got some help. There's a great ministry called Tin Man Ministry that I started to meet with a guy weekly, and got someone on the other side of me to reflect back to me what they were seeing, what they were hearing, helping me to become attuned to what was going on inside of my own heart, start to give attention to what I was feeling and what I needed at a relational level, both with God and myself and people. And did 14 months of weekly meetings and one full week intensive, and it was just unbelievably transformative for me. And I am more alive to Jesus, to my heart, to my relationships around me than I've ever been. I look back and I have to give myself grace for the ways I failed in everything I just said, and in that
yeah.
I wasn't really as alive as I thought I was. I had a lot of cognitive knowledge and an ability, giftedness to articulate that, but I would have bet if most people would talk about what it was like to be on the other side of me prior to my own journey, they would say, "Yeah, I love being around Jeff, but I feel lonely when I'm with him. I don't know if he knows how to attach
Mm,
or truly be present with his real self in these moments." And no one ever said that to me, but later on people came to me and said, "You're not the same." And they even use that language, like it feels like you're more present than you ever
mm,
were before. And that journey has changed how I think about disciple making. Because now I realize, like, if I can't be present with a not yet believer and be aware of what's going on in their emotional relational world, then I'm trying to bring these cognitive truths without any relational embodiment.
mhm,
And it's no wonder I'm not seeing nearly as much effectiveness, because they're not feeling me attached to them either. So it's like,
mhm.
okay, great idea, great thoughts, and but they don't need great ideas and thoughts. They need a person. They need a body, right? The
Yeah.
gospel came with a body. Jesus was fully present, Emmanuel, in his body. And now through his church, he wants to be fully present through us to the world. But if we don't have our own hearts and we can't hardly be present with ourselves, how in the world are we going to bring the presence of Jesus
Mm,
to a group of people? And so it's changed, like, even in our pathway, without people knowing it, we've built it in. So,
mhm,
like, a good example is, like, at the infant stage, what do you do with an infant? Well, you wanna listen to their cry. It's okay that they cry, because if they cry, they're knowing how to make their needs known through their crying. Well, what do you do with
yeah.
a brand new Christian? You teach them confession, which is just saying out loud what's going on inside of their heart. We're
Mm,
not just confessing sin, we confess fear and doubt and hurt and loneliness and shame and guilt, all these feelings. We can teach them how to give voice to what's going on in their heart, then they'll bring their whole self before God, like the psalmists teach us to do. And now they start to have a real relationship with the living God. And I think that's the very first part of spiritual formation is like before they even start reading the Bible, which they need to do, we got to teach them how to actually show up with their need for God. And so we build that into help leaders build that into their pathways so that progressively people are moving towards spiritual, emotional, and relational health the entire process. I would have never done that before. It would have
Yeah.
been it'd have been ideas and practices, head and hands. But
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with the heart other than
Yeah.
say, believe, just believe on the Lord and you'll be saved. And that was it. And it's like, oh, there's more than that. Jesus
Yeah.
regularly asks people, what do you want? Not just
Hmm.
what do you believe? He
Yeah.
did ask, what do you believe? Who do you believe I am? But it's also, what do you want? He went
Yeah.
after their hearts. And so I think that we've got to grow in that area. You personally have been a part of that too as we've journeyed together. And I'm just telling you, it changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say for those listening, if you need two witnesses to confirm this statement, I will I will affirm all that has been said. It's definitely changed the way that I think about disciple making in my own life. Um, I don't know if I got this from you or not, but always with different people I'm engaged with now in that way, I say I think we left the heart out of disciple making, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's a silly sort of phrase because we're so used to hearing I invited Jesus into my heart, but until you have that more comprehensive view of like, what is your heart telling you? And
Yeah.
he's already in tune to that.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, like I said, there's two things we're working on out of those five, the disciple making and leader health. We're giving more and more energy to the leader health piece increasingly. So just brought another guy on our team who may be one of the best at caring for the heart. His name
Mm,
is Abe Meisenberg, because I want him to help us build and design more and more tools, experiences, pathways around emotional health that integrate into a church's process, because a lot of churches don't know how to build this into their culture. And Abe may be one of the best I know at it. I mean, the Tin
mm,
Man guys are really great, so I affirm them really, but they're not. They're one of the things they're not trying to do is like build a culture in your church. They feel like
yeah,
that's part of my job, and people like
yeah,
us. It's like let's take it now to the church and help the church build a new culture around leader health and disciple health, not just leader health.
yeah.
Like every
That's
member
right.
should be healthy. So, yeah, I'm excited to see that grow over the next few years, because increasingly, I think the church is thankfully awakening to this reality and acknowledging that we need to do something about it, so that
Yeah,
we can raise up a lot more healthy people.
yeah. Amen. I want to raise healthy kids, and part of that
Yeah.
is all of the emotional side of it.
Yeah, because you will reproduce who you are with your own children too. I mean, that's the other
That's right.
thing. You want to see what you're like? Look at your children.
Yep. They are a very good mirror.
They are a good mirror. Yep.
All right, last question. It almost seems like a silly question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway and let you speak into this. Of 400 movements, we have this mission of like we want to shift the tracks of history from institutional to a movemental form of Christianity.
Hmm.
Why is this MDNA so essential?
In particular, disciple making or the whole? Yeah,
Yeah,
disciple making.
disciple.
Well, I mean, at the heart of movements, you have to have people that are developed and mobilized. Like you don't have a movement if it can't go beyond you. And so if you've created a codependent model that constantly needs you to do everything for them, that will never go anywhere.
Mm,
You might amass a bunch of people in one building, but that's not a movement. That's a
yeah.
moment. And sadly, most people are great at creating moments, right? We have a great Sunday experience. We call something a revival because we had a time of extended prayer or worship, and those are all great. Those aren't movements.
Hmm.
Movements are when you equip people to be able to take what's been deposited in them and bring it to somebody else without you needing to hold their hand or do it for them anymore. And when
Wow.
you've got that happening generation after generation, and most people say you've got to be looking at, third, fourth, fifth generation. Do you see it going beyond you to that many generations? That's when you see a movement. And it's why I think we see almost no evidence of movements in the West because the dominant model in the West is creating moments and creating gatherings. And we have a cul-de-sac called a program or a Sunday event, and we get people in it, but we don't know how to get people to leave it
Mm,
and be equipped and prepared to go bring it somewhere else without us doing it all for them. And so I think if we want to see movemental Christianity in the West, this has got to be something we rethink
mhm.
and make the number one priority for the church, frankly. I mean, I think all the other things are important, but if you don't get disciple making, you don't have any of it. None
Yeah.
of it will happen.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Well, Jeff, thanks for your time. Always learn from you when I get to hang. So grateful for that. If people do want to take a next step with you, you mentioned the website earlier, but you could say that again. Anything else that would also be helpful?
yeah, saturatetheworld.com. If you're interested in the disciple making lab, there's a drop down menu that you can click on and find out more about that there, or any of the resources as well. Those are available at saturatetheworld.com. I also use all the other social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook still, but hardly at all. But yeah, those are other means to connect with me if you want to.
Yeah, and for those listening to this podcast as well, Jeff has a podcast as well, so I'm sure you can find that at Saturate the World. So if you want continued thought input on disciple making, and encourage you to listen to that, but would also encourage you, don't just listen for the thought input, like engage for the next steps.
Yeah, let us serve you
So
if we can, man. We'd love to help.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So thanks for taking the time today to listen to this conversation on disciple making. Again, if you want to take next steps with 100 Movements, you can visit 100movements.com, take the MDNA strengths assessment. Again, be sure to check out saturatetheworld.com. And we'll see you next time as we talk about the missional incarnational impulse. See ya.